A dark fantastic network presentation. Last scene. A mystery.
William was on his way down. An hour ago, as soon as Cooper had told him what was happening with Lara, he'd known what he had to do. So he'd picked up the phone again. "Mr. Goff. It's Billy." "Hello, Billy. Are you okay? You sound a bit winded." "I need your help," William said. "Name it, my boy," Mr. Goff said. And William had told him where he needed to go and that he couldn't get the gun in his pocket past the Connors Hotel security. So he needed another way in. Mr. Goff thought about it for a moment, then said, "I think I know whom to call." An hour later, James, a former student in Mr. Goff's English class and who was lovingly known back in high school as the Jamster, had met William at a back alley close to the hotel and had told him that he owed Mr. Goff a favor and that he knew how to get William into the Connors Hotel's sub-basement. The Connors Hotel, James explained, was built by Rick Connors, an eccentric Anglophile who patterned his building after a couple of famous hotels in London, built in the 1920s, which had a number of subterranean levels with labyrinthine passages in which you could get lost in and never be found. The Jamster, in his neat overalls and polished workman's boots and who moved fast despite his girth, had managed to locate just the right manhole and use his manhole key with impressive skill. And voila, the manhole was open and William was climbing down rungs of a steel ladder. "Good luck," the Jamster had said, giving William an elegant salute before replacing the manhole cover. Now, William was underground, flashlight in hand, following Lara and Johnny's trail. But it was a near impossible task. It was a maze down here, what with the pipes and the endless walkways and the steam and the hum of machinery. The hum. He wondered if that was what had brought Lara and Johnny down here, Lara unable to resist the siren call. But damned if he could distinguish one hum from another down here. The noise was deafening and the heat was making it hard to think. But he had to find his way, had to see this thing through. The lights started to dim, the steam taking on a silvery glow. And the noise. The sounds all around him were growing fainter, fainter. There was something in the air. A feeling like the stillness before a storm. The coming of a change. Footsteps echoing around him. William pointed the beam of the flashlight one way, then another, trying to find the source of the sound. But it was getting darker, the echoes getting louder. The footsteps coming closer, closer. William raised his flashlight. The footsteps. They were coming from above. The light hit the ceiling. And William thought he saw something. A glimpse of someone in black, walking upside down. The sound changed direction. William lowered the flashlight again. Ahead. That was where the sound was coming from now. A burst of steam from a leaking pipe obscuring his vision. The steam receded, revealing a corridor that William hadn't noticed before. The footsteps, they were walking away down that corridor. William swallowed, tried to slow down his breathing. The fear. He had to get a grip. With the back of his left hand, he wiped the sweat off his face. He took a couple of deep breaths and walked on. "Where exactly are we going?" Jerry said. "You mean you don't know where we are?" Lara said, her back to him. "I know where we are. Sort of. I meant, what are you looking for exactly?" he said, sounding anything but sure of where they were. Lara faced him, then sighed. "I don't know." And she noticed that Johnny was nowhere to be found. "Where's Johnny?" she said, looking at Jerry accusingly. "You mean the man who was with you? I thought he was right behind us." Lara walked past Jerry, looked around her. But Johnny wasn't here. She tried to focus, maybe pick up his voice or the sound of his footsteps somewhere nearby. But it was impossible with all the noise around her. "We need to find him. He might be in danger," Lara said. "In danger? You mean getting lost down here?" "Yeah, sure. Let me get in touch with Mr. Tyler, the chief of security. He'll check the security cameras and find your friend in no time," Jerry said and started speaking into his walkie-talkie. Again. Lara nodded, starting to feel really tired for the first time. All that running around, all that tension was finally getting to her. She let out a breath, bent her head down, and tried to relax. Jerry moved away from her a little, still speaking into the walkie-talkie. He started speaking a little louder. "Yeah, we think he's lost his way down here. Try to pick him up on the system. And maybe, just maybe, you can find Michelle's body for her too," he said. She looked up, startled. "What did you just say?" But Jerry was gone. William followed the stranger in black deeper into the dark corridor. He wasn't walking that fast, but no matter how much William tried, he couldn't catch up to him. And the more William walked, the longer that corridor seemed as the steam billowing around him got heavier, more opaque. He could hardly see a couple of feet ahead of him. He was afraid to lose him, and he was afraid to reach him. He knew the hotel sub-basement wasn't this big. It was physically impossible that a hotel the size of the Connors could have a maze of corridors this size under its ground floor. No, the stranger was leading him away into a place unknown. William started to slow down, suddenly realizing the sheer recklessness of what he was doing. If he caught up with that man, that entity, he might die. Johnny had told him so. William slowed down a little more. He would die. William stopped. Sweat started forming under his scalp, his armpits. That icy shiver in the middle of his body, just below his rib cage, started to take hold again like it always did when he was terrified. Started to take hold again like it always did when he was a kid, right before his grandfather gave him a beating. Like it did right before he blew a hole through his grandpa's chest. William turned around. He couldn't do this. He couldn't face that thing. He didn't want to die. Then it came, bearing down on him, getting louder and louder. The sound of the machine. Lara was lost. That guy Jerry had taken her deeper into this damn maze than she'd previously realized. She had thought he was helping her find her way to where she needed to go when, in fact, she'd been blindly following him towards a destination he had predetermined. Where was she? And where did she need to go? What was she looking for? She leaned against a dirty wall and started to cry. She tried to stop it, but it was no use. The tears just flooded out of her as she moaned and wept and lost herself completely to the fear and pain. It was catching up to her. All that thinking, all that worrying, all that imagining. She should never have believed that stranger. He'd promised to reunite her with her sister if she did what he asked. But it was all a lie. She had been running away, hiding from the truth. Michelle was probably dead. Michelle wasn't coming back. Her little sister, who'd liked pink bubbles in the bath when she was a baby and who hated strawberry milkshakes with a vengeance. Her little sister who'd grown into a beautiful, headstrong, confused, and loving young woman. Michelle. Lara couldn't fathom not seeing her again, not talking to her one more time. What had happened? What had caused this gap between them? When did they stop communicating? Who had started it? This strange estrangement? This bitter competition to see who'd blink first? The things we do, Lara thought. The things we do to each other. How they grow and take on a life of their own. She stopped crying, wiping away the tears with the back of her hand. She was shaky. She felt weak, spent. She was lost, and there was nothing she could do to bring back Michelle. If the police couldn't find her, if Cooper's money didn't help one bit, then all was lost. She pushed herself away from the wall and started walking, hoping to find her way back. William pushed his way through the steam, following the hum. He was getting closer and closer, the hum getting louder and louder. And then it changed. Now it was a thumping sound like the beat of a bass drum. He felt it in his teeth. It made his eardrums quiver. He covered his ears with his hands, trying to shut it out. But it wouldn't let go. It was inescapable. Another curtain of steam. He pushed his way through. "We meet again," the stranger in black said. He was standing there in the middle of an empty space, his back turned. A light was shining from above, a few inches away from him, casting him partway in shadow. Steam was billowing around the place in intermittent waves, catching the light, giving it back in silvery shimmers. Upon seeing him, William suddenly felt the need to touch the revolver. He pushed his hand slowly into his jacket pocket, touching the grip with the tips of his fingers. "A Ruger Bisley, a prince of a gun," the stranger said, slowly turning around. The stranger's knowledge reminded William what he was dealing with. He was dealing with something powerful, something outside the realm of his own reality. "I know who you are, Jack," William said. The stranger now faced him. He was elegantly dressed all in black, like the last time they'd met. There was a touch of red somewhere, a tie or a handkerchief, perhaps, but no matter how hard he tried, William couldn't seem to place it. He felt it more than saw it, and the sensation disoriented him. "Is that who you think I am?" the stranger said with a trace of a smile. William pushed his hand deeper into his pocket, gripping the handle of the gun. "It doesn't matter. You can call me anything you want. You can call me Jack." And just for a moment, his eyes changed shape, a yellowish light shining from behind two vertical slits. Then they changed back into something that William's mind could handle. "You're so afraid. I wonder why. Why are you so afraid, William?" Jack said, raising his right hand, gently touching his breast pocket. And William saw how long and thin and pale those fingers were. Yet there was power there. He could feel it from where he stood. "What do you want?" William said. Anger flashed on Jack's face, quickly followed by a smile. "I don't want anything. What I want, I've already found." And he started moving away from William, pacing slowly. As Jack did so, the space beside him started to shimmer, and William noticed that the sounds around him were changing. The thumping sound was fading away, being replaced by the sound of gears, steam, and pistons. It reminded him of a steam train getting ready to leave the station. Jack stopped pacing, and the shimmer got stronger, its waves faster. As the sounds rose, something was starting to take shape. A huge machine, its steel surface laced with gold and silver bolts. A number of open pipes protruded from its top and sides like leaning chimneys, and from them it exhaled steam, the same silvery hue that had engulfed William on his way to this place. "It's waking up," Jack said, a look of quiet triumph on his elusive face. "It's his god," William thought. "Not my god. More my ally," Jack said, as if reading William's thoughts. "Where's Michelle?" William said. "Michelle? She's following the path to her heart's desire." The machine roared, its steel surface vibrating with life. It was solidifying more and more as Jack walked towards it, his right hand reaching for it, touching its surface gently. As his hand touched the metal, the skin sizzled, but he showed no sign of pain or pleasure. A door started to appear in the middle of the machine, a door big enough for a man to pass through. And William felt the pull of that door, the need to come closer, grab its shining handle. Jack pulled his hand away from the machine, and William saw that it was unharmed, the skin perfect and porcelain white. "What do you want, Billy?" Jack said. "What are you looking for?" "Tell me where she is," William said. "You already know. She's waiting for you." "Stop playing games," William said, slowly taking the revolver out of his pocket. Like the last time he'd met Jack, William felt that sudden moves were dangerous in that creature's presence. "Not play games?" Jack said and laughed a gentle laugh. "What else is there?" William raised the gun. Jack looked at the gun, a look of admiration on his face. "A beautiful weapon. Classic design," he said. The expression on his face changed, and William found himself taking a step back, unnerved by Jack's gaze. Jack said, "I'm going to ask you one last time." A metallic sound of one final piece clicking into place. The machine was awake, and it was ready. "What do you want, Billy?" Lara hoped she was going the right way. She really needed to get out of here. The steam and that musty, wet smell were making her dizzy. "Lara!" a voice called, and Lara saw it was Michelle standing there, only a few feet away. Lara opened her eyes wide, trying to make sure she wasn't losing her mind. But it was Michelle standing there in a sleeveless evening dress, looking gorgeous, looking unharmed. Lara ran to her sister and wrapped her arms around her, tears streaming down her face. "My God! Michelle, you're okay. Thank God," Lara said as she cried. But her sister just stood there, not moving, not saying anything. Lara let her go and looked into her face. "You are okay, aren't you, Mickey?" Lara said, calling Michelle by the nickname she'd come up with when Michelle was just a baby. Michelle nodded. "I'm fine, Lara." "Are you sure?" Lara said, wiping the tears away, trying to get herself under control. But how could she? Her little sister was back, she was safe, and Lara would never let her get out of her sight again. "Where have you been? What happened?" Lara said, taking her sister's hands in hers. But at the touch of Michelle's hand, Lara suddenly pulled away, afraid. And then she heard it. A voice. Words echoing down the corridor behind her. She turned around. "I want you to tell me where she is. Now." It was William's voice, and he was close. "It's all for Lara," someone replied, and Lara knew that voice. It was the stranger. "Oh my God," Lara said, then turned to Michelle. "Come on." But Michelle was already gone. "I want you to leave us alone," William said. Jack shook his head. "Why are you here with me?" Jack said. "I want you to tell me where she is. Now," William said, cocking the hammer of the revolver. "It's all for Lara. All this running around, this detective work, this searching. You really want her." William didn't respond. Too many thoughts, too many sensations. He was on the verge of collapse, and it was all he could do to stay focused. "Stop or I'll shoot." "If she's what you really want, just say it," Jack said.
"William."
It was Lara, and her voice seemed to be coming from inside the machine. William flinched. Jack stopped moving and smiled. The door to the machine opened, and out came the man who'd stabbed Johnny, the blade in his hand glimmering with fresh blood. "What have you done to her?" William shouted. The man smiled, then looked at Jack, seeking permission. A barely perceptible nod from Jack, and the man smiled. "Your lady?" "I done whatever I pleased," the man said.
"William."
She called again, her voice sounding weaker now. William glanced at the door. The man, taking advantage of the moment, pounced. William turned, raised the gun, and assumed a gunfighter's stance. He fired, then cocked the hammer with the palm of his left hand, then fired again and again, blowing the man away, the blood splatter touching William's shirt collar, his left shoulder. The smoke cleared. The man was on the floor, on his back, blood coming out of his mouth. William was breathing heavily, his face covered in sweat. And it hit him. The sweet smell of gunpowder, the rush of adrenaline, the power. Jack looked at William and grinned. "Mr. William Last, glad to finally meet you." Jack turned around, walked ahead. And when he reached the wall, he kept walking, defying reality. And William watched Spring-Heel Jack walk across the ceiling, deeper into darkness, and disappear. "Billy," Lara said. Ahead, she could see William standing there, a dying man at his feet. Before him, something shimmered, a metallic structure, a door, but the view wasn't clear, as if she was seeing it through a cracked lens. "Billy," she said again, louder, but he didn't turn around. Instead, he headed towards the machine. William heard Lara calling out to him again. It sounded farther away this time, but it was still coming from inside the machine. As he walked towards it, he looked down at the dying man as he struggled to breathe through his blooded mouth. The man was looking up at the ceiling, unseeing. He promised me everything," he said, tears starting to flow from his eyes. A servant of the machine, William thought as he looked down at the man, feeling pity for him. The man closed his eyes, coughed, his uneven breathing becoming louder, faster. William moved past him, closer to the door. What if it's trying to trick me, William thought. What if Lara isn't there? But he couldn't risk it. If Lara was there, inside the machine, if that man had hurt her. No, he couldn't take that chance, come what might. He had to see, and with the thrill of firing the revolver still coursing through him, he crossed the threshold, into the machine. Inside, all was dark. The sounds of machinery, of pistons firing, of gears turning, started to slow down, fade into the background. William gripped the gun tighter, feeling its solidity, its innate power. He felt disoriented. This shift from light to dark, from noise to stillness, was jarring. He closed his eyes, opened them again. His vision adapted. A shape was moving ahead of him, coming his way. Then the sound of a robin singing. William froze. The figure came closer, revealing more and more of its shape. A man in a black suit, his hair dark. He looked strong, his movements calculated, graceful, predatory. In his right hand, something gleamed. The robin sang in the background, its music echoing in the air. Behind the stranger, something shimmered, took shape. A skyline, city lights, the faint sounds of traffic. William tried to focus, tried to remember what he was doing here. He was losing control. What was real? What was an illusion? The man stopped, his face in shadow. William said, "Who are you?" The man just stood there, waiting. "Where is she?" William said. Then, lightning quick, the man raised his revolver. Before William could move, the man fired. And as the bullet came for him, William knew who that man was. The flash from the barrel of the gun had revealed his face. It was William Last, killing himself. The door to the machine slammed shut. Johnny opened his eyes. He was shivering, his head burning. He was lying on the floor on his back. He tried to move. Pain coursed through his every nerve. He looked down. A gushing wound in the middle of his body. He was dying and he couldn't move. He opened his mouth to speak, but he couldn't make a sound. He had no strength and his throat felt dry. Oh, what he wouldn't do for a nip of scotch. He laid his head back on the cool floor, looked up at the ceiling, the pipes, the interconnected wires. He was dying and he was dying alone. The typical fate of an alcoholic. A cliché, really. He smiled and closed his eyes. A memory came to him. That time in Marble Arch when he'd gone into a Virgin megastore to get a cassette and discovered that he had no money on him. He must have been 14 or 15. Strange how the mind worked. Why that memory? Why now? He tried to open his eyes, but they wouldn't obey. He gave up, waited for the end to come. If only the pain would go away. The sound of footsteps, high heels, a woman, coming for him. Lara stood before the machine, unmoving, afraid. A tap on her shoulder. She turned. It was William, but he looked different. Older, stronger. His clothes were dark, his eyes carrying a world of pain. On his hip, a holster. Inside it, a formidable gun. Something that would blow a man to pieces. Yet, he was still William. Still the man she'd always known. She felt it, she was sure of it. He came closer. "Remember everything," he whispered to her. She nodded, tears coming to her eyes. He bent down and kissed her long and hard, the kind of kiss she'd always wanted from him but could never have. She opened her eyes and sat up in bed. She was in the bedroom. The dream over. It was still dark outside. She stayed in bed, waiting for the dawn. 2 past midnight. That's when the fire started eating its way through the old building. No one knew how it started, that fire. It burned and it burned, eating, destroying, wiping away every trace. And as the consoles and the tapes and the microphones melted in the heat, as the WKIT-12 radio station burned to the ground, Michelle watched from afar, mesmerized, waiting for her reward.
This has been Last Seen, a Mystery by Ahmed Khalifa. Produced by the Dark Fantastic Network.
Epilogue. He closed the front door as gently as he could. Is that you, honey? Tommy closed his eyes, annoyed. He didn't want to talk to his mom right now. Yes, Mom. She hurried out of the living room. You're a little late, you know. I was worried, she said. Sorry, Mom, short legs and all. She smiled a knowing smile and smoothed down his unruly hair. Dinner in 5 minutes, she said, giving him another look. Are you all right? You look a little pale. I'm fine. Just a little tired, he said. All the reading wiped you out, huh? She said, teasing him. Sure, Mom, he said, heading for the stairs. He could feel her watching him as he went up. He reached the landing and went to his room. He dropped his backpack on the floor and took off his shoes. He sat on the bed, taking a couple of deep breaths. He tried to calm down, process things. That lady in white. Looking into her pale, beautiful face as she touched his neck, it had scared him. Maybe it was what she had said to him. Remember me. Or maybe it was her ice-cold touch.